Hi, everybody, and welcome to the showcase. My name is Natalie Field, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist and researcher from South Africa, and I'm currently living in Norway. And today I will be presenting mapping methodologies for attention directly in the research catalog, which is an online platform for the dissemination of artistic research. So it's a little bit experimental, and I hope it's going to go okay. Mapping methodologies for attention engages the mentorship program archive to draw a correlation between art methodologies and environmental pedagogy. So through a conceptual and material investigation, this exposition explores the transformative nature of artistic research and working with 5 Creature Conserve alumni projects that function at this intersection of reciprocity, where knowledge is not only transformed, but also transmitted through the work of art. My own project, A Murder of Crows, becomes a site of experimentation, where their methodologies are tested, troubled, and reimagined. So here you can see a little bit what the research catalog looks like and how it functions. So I'm hoping that you'll find that interesting today. Field note, 23 February 2024. My walk down the path led to the beautiful sight of melted snow creating a shallow lake engulfing the graves, headstones rising from their own reflections. The cacophony of calls sets an eerie tone to the scene, and I, now engulfed in your chaos, open sky above. Your silhouettes extend from the trees all around. The sky seems to me to be a specific color blue before you take your flight. Detaching from the trees to swirl in the sky, your wings paint the night black. Early in 2024, I came upon a dramatic scene in the graveyard of 𝗔𝗕𝗄𝗏 Cathedral in Trondheim, and soon learned that every year a murder of crow descends on the city for the winter. And this spectacular sight became my Roman Empire, my obsession and my absolute inspiration. And like a crow, I collect every bit of shiny information I can find about them. Roosting sites in Trondheim have been recorded with up to 10,000 hooded crows, often accompanied by several hundred carrion crows, around 100 jackdaws, and also occasionally ravens. Such gathering sites are marked by great activity and high levels of noise and is referred to as crowing. However, I have stayed at these sites of crowing I have identified for long enough to know that this is actually just the rendezvous, as they will ultimately take flight to roost elsewhere for the night. But when this murder of 300-odd crows flock together, the sight is breathtaking, overwhelming, and to be honest, a little bit unsettling. My research has revealed mixed reactions around their presence, ranging from extensive culling to people creating funerary rites for dead crows in the graveyard, which I just love. This piqued my interest in how cultural biases shape our opinions of certain species and relates to the ethical dilemma of charismatic species bias, which deems some animals more conservation-worthy than others. A bias that is particularly problematic for cynanthropes. Cynanthropes are undomesticated organisms, and especially animals, that live in close association with people and benefit from our surroundings and our activities. And there you can hear me crying a little bit because I was so excited about actually capturing these shots. Cynanthropes. They are the flowers that grow in the cracks in the streets, the birds that nest in the eaves. And with our lives entangled through space and time, cynanthropes provide us with a unique opportunity for interspecies dialogue. And yet it is these beings that relate the most to us that we consider to be weeds and pests. So how can we save the natural world as something that is distant, abstract, or exotic when we cannot even embrace our relationship with nature that insists on living on our doorstep? How can we begin healing this divide between human and the animal other by caring for the animals that actually share kinship with us? Rosalie Edge poignantly points out that the time to save a species is when it is still common. And thank you, Lisa, for introducing me to that quote. But the cultural shift begins at home, and mine with the hooded crow, 𝗕𝘗𝗄𝑎 𝘕𝑛𝑖𝑥. So I'll share a little bit about the methodology that I used to build this research. Taking replicability as the point of departure, I scoured the video recordings and documentation of 45 past mentorship projects to select the ones that I thought engaged the public in constructive learning. And I started to pull at a little red thread because these artists were not simply making art, they were acting like on, with, and through the world around them. And each artist's contribution is presented as like a side quest in this exposition. And we will be weaving in and out of interview style layouts of their work as we explore their various methodologies. So the first one we're going to be looking at is 𝘕𝗛𝘭𝘁𝘐's practice of breathing. Yes. Okay. So for a while, for most people, I think breathing will only ever be experienced as the body's automated response to a desire for living. But those practicing meditation, yoga, or even running may also have discovered it as a method for self-regulation. But beyond these like bodily functions, what can we learn through this act of inhaling and exhaling? For a cross-genre writer, 𝘕𝗛𝘭𝘁, it was difficulty breathing that first drew them to the subject matter. Having suffered from asthma throughout life, they have mapped their struggle with public health, pollution, and ecological change extensively through speculative and documentary writing. Yeah, so following consecutive natural disasters in Houston, the Tax Day floods and Hurricane Harvey, this practice evolved to explore individual and collective responses to disaster through improved choral performance, installation, and speculative writing. And working in collaboration with the interdisciplinary artist, 𝘈𝘗𝘂, they gathered and shared breathing rituals and speculative dreaming in what they call an emergent broadcast system, breathing in a time of disaster. So focusing on localized shared experiences, the Creature Conserve project number 98403, which relates to a postcode, offers 3 interconnected parts from contributions that are collected through an open call aimed specifically at marginalized communities. So using the instructions in the online participation form, I extrapolated a little ritual from them, which was to start recording, speak your name and your location, and then breathe for at least 1 minute, and then submitting your work as an audio or video file in MP3, MP4, or in a wavelength. I head out on a Sunday morning. The city is still asleep at 7 o'clock. Sunrise is only at 8:05. Light snow is falling. The air quality is good, with an air quality index of 24.
Natalie Field, 23 March 2025, 𝘕𝘐𝘗𝘁 in Trondheim.
Field note, 23 February 2024. I take the usual route towards 𝘊𝘳𝘥𝘚, spot the murder on the other side of the river, make my way over 𝘔𝘔𝘔𝘚, and find myself in the 𝘕𝘊𝘳𝘥𝘚𝗏 graveyard. It is alive with birdsong. A silly woodpecker hammers incessantly into the 2-centimeter deep wooden board of a housey hole that the humans have hung on the tree for its convenience. I sweep the snow from a log with my boot to take a seat and press record on a borrowed Zoom H4n Pro. I breathe deeply and consistently, my face so close to the mic that I'm worried about condensation on the electronics. After about 3 minutes, I realize I never pressed record. Who's the silly one now? I try again, and in the background, the corps of crows derail the song of tits, while the woodpecker peckers away at his futile attempt to build a home. A dove suddenly breaks into the cacophony, and I cannot help but smile. Can you hear a smile on your breath? The air is too cold to take off my gloves and the gloves too thick to hold the pen. I wait to get home and write enthusiastically about my experience. I record a reading of the 𝗊𝘄𝘀𝘀 lumen of my being, download all the files, and the settings were wrong. I haven't captured anything after all. It is a good thing this project is process rather than outcome-oriented. Still, I am as disappointed as I know that woodpecker will be when he finally reaches the other side of that plank to find that wood was no longer tree.
I open my mouth and let the breath flow, drawing the universe into me, sucking you into my bronchial passages. I let you sit there in the 𝗊𝘄𝘀𝘀 lumen of my being, as you seep into my blood through this transmutation of ether. Everything is in everything. Panta in Panti. I gather the carbon of my matter and express us from my lungs as a gift to the habitat that surrounds us. And watch the physical manifestation of our souls meet the -11-degree morning, dissolve into a mixture of metaphysics. I am in you, and you are in me. We are becoming the crone.
And here, in between the sound waves, I found an intersection between the work of Ching-In Chen and Catherine Fletcher, who works with the idea of listening. Catherine Fletcher also works with acoustics as the foundation for her environmental research project, Approaching the Animal. Fletcher is a writer and a sound artist from Virginia, USA, investigating the intersection of human and more than human worlds through one of humanity's oldest art forms, poetry. Taking inspiration from other disciplines to reinvent poetic form for contemporary audiences, Fletcher takes an eco-acoustic perspective at the entry point for her inquiry. As a result, Fletcher's writing is inspired by sound and place, formalized on paper, but also vocalized and performed in chorus with her soundscapes. Harnessing her regional environment, she counters this misconception that biodiversity loss and extinction only occurs in distant exotic places, and instead focuses on hyperlocalized sites with ecological significance. So in this particular project, she worked with these locations. There we are. Which is the Eastern Shore Barrier Islands in Northampton County, Dragon Run in Middlesex County, and Rockfish Gap in Nelson County. Working with the project, I consider ways of interpreting her methodology and favor this idea of sono-poetizing to describe the act of transmuting sound into poetry. But ultimately, I decide at the core of her practice is the simple act of listening. Now, considering that the eye has no eyelid, it is curious that while we cannot choose not to hear, unless, of course, we cover our ears and go, la, 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 we struggle enormously with listening. And if it is so difficult for us to listen to other humans, then using listening as a tool for understanding the more than human world comes with its own challenges. And then the question is, who are we listening to? Because listening is also a selective exercise. And cultural and ecological biases might influence the trained ear to reach for certain sounds while maybe ignoring others. So my first instinct was to actually cut the sounds of the church bells and the train horn and children laughing and electric cars from my own recordings. But then, of course, I'm working with urban crows, and this is our habitat. And we cannot be apart from it because we are part of it. Everything is in everything. So what then are we listening for? Creatures, landscapes, or ecosystems? Sounds, rhythms, life, silence, absence, extinction? Having taken an introspective journey listening to our inner workings through breathwork, here we reach beyond the self for the awareness of the other, to allow the world that lives to speak. My project is hyperlocalized with the crowing sites mapped in a 5-kilometer radius. At first, when I go out, I'm heading for a specific location with a goal in mind. But over time, I realize that they are nomadic. So I begin to listen, to attune myself with their movements by following their course through the neighborhood wherever it leads. I have gone on crow hunts in rain, fog, and snow, but the very first morning I set out with Fletcher's methodology, it was a perfectly sunny day at -1 degrees Celsius.
Fingers reaching towards blue, toes buried deep beneath the white, and we, sun-facing, swaying side by side in an Arctic breeze that tugs at loose ends, shimmering purple in brief golden light, as we occasionally take flight. The gulls have overstayed their winter welcome. While down below, memories of bodies touching down in snow lie imprinted on a world that will soon drift away. As the days lengthen, desire for colder climes strengthen. Here, we cannot stay.
The next artist works we will be exploring is 𝘱𝑉𝑎𝑛𝑦 𝘸𝑚𝑦, working with reflecting. Now, while I would argue that some form of reflection actually lies at the core of all 5 artist practices, Bengalurian illustrator and visual designer 𝘱𝑉𝑎𝑛𝑦 𝘸𝑚𝑦 spotlights this methodology in her children's picture book, Neighborhood. So 𝘱𝑉𝑎𝑛𝑦 uses visual storytelling to encourage readers to explore their urban environment through nature walks, bird watching, and journaling. And she shares a quirky narrative of an urban Indian ecosystem that plays out over the course of a day. And while 𝘚𝘕𝘠𝘀's methodology offers the opportunity for tracing her journey from nature journaling all the way through to a completed book, I was more interested in everything else that you see here, which is the journaling part of it. She concludes the book with a set of prompts suggesting that bird watching is a good starting point to take note of the local birds, their favored locations, their food preferences, physical features, and interesting behaviors, and also offers more speculative journaling activities. For example, designing your own feathered friend. She also describes her own activities of observing, noting, mapping, sketching, researching, reflective writing, and storytelling. Interested in these revelations that reflective engagement might offer. So by transmuting the stories that unfolded both in front of my eyes and behind them in acrylic paint and pen, I've started to create a tangible artifact of not only memories, but also speculative theories developed as patterns emerged. So in working with the soundscapes inspired by Fletcher's process, the embodied activity of listening to the crows allowed me to discover a range of nuanced sounds. So from like really low growls to like cheerful chatter at dusk, their vocal range extends well beyond the caws that we commonly associate with hooded crows. I add another layer of observation to the listening, visually observing that the crows have a tendency to duck their head down before they caw and then extend their neck out during the act, as though they're playing a tiny little concertina in their throat. Craw, craw, craw. But the crows don't always come in threes. As I discovered taking my shortcut home through an alleyway at night, here around 10 to 20 crows do actually roost for the night, and upon approaching them, they normally sound an alarm, a single caw. When I walk amongst them, a second call confirms my presence, and as I exit, safety is confirmed with a final call. But if I stop to look at them, the watcher takes flight in a cacophony of calls that follows in their wake. So I don't stop there anymore because nobody likes to be woken from their slumber. But I do enjoy walking there, knowing that they're hidden in the dark watching me as much as I'm sensing them being there. A core activity in 𝘚𝘕𝘠𝘀's birdwatching observations is her use of photographic documentation, which is my tool of preference. So using photography as a reflective tool, I noticed that just as one might not always listen when you're hearing, I also discovered myself not necessarily observing when seeing. And post-production actually revealed much of what was lost in the chaos of the murder. So one of my favorites was this scuffle between these two crows. And you have to wonder what's the story here, who said what? But the challenge was accepted, and after 2 quick rounds, dominance had been established. And one crow was literally bowing down before the victor. And I just loved finding this in my footage because I didn't know what was happening when I was watching it, actually. So yeah, humans are not the only ones who build societies around hierarchical structures. And this tendency towards dominance had also occurred to me while watching the crows doing what I call the spire dance from a cafe, a playful competition to see who will be crowned the king of the 𝘕𝘱𝘗𝑔𝘗𝑚𝑛's loftiest finial, the cathedral cross. As the tallest structure in Trondheim, this seat offers the best viewpoint of the city, and I can only speculate what all they have witnessed from there for the brief second where they are allowed to actually touch down. Moving along, we will be looking at the methodology of connecting, which is practiced by 𝘈𝘠𝑦𝑡₍ So this interaction between nature, artists, scientists, and public actually lies at the heart of Creature Conserve's objectives. And this type of community building is core to taking collective responsibility, as illustrated by Faith Williams, a high school art teacher from Aurora, Colorado, and alumni Creature Conserve fellow. Harnessing her experience as an educator to further environmental pedagogy, Williams connected with her community to focus on the big picture of little creatures, appreciating insects and tiny critters that run the world. Working with the goal of reshaping perspectives about insects, she worked with her city's team to create a community-wide art exhibition and event series involving more than 90 artists, poets, and scientists in Boulder, which I think is just so impressive. And in her interview, the artist provides us with a 9-step blueprint for planning a community-based exhibition. And my attention was drawn to number 8, create ways for others to be involved in meaningful ways. So taking an open call for events approach to engage the community in the program, the month-long exhibition that they hosted had 10 events that included activities like guided hikes, workshops, performances, poetry readings, panel discussions, science talks, and more. So then I asked myself, what activities could I facilitate for interdisciplinary exchange between myself as the artist, local scientists, and society at large? And of course, here I'm including the crows as well. So in response, I created a hypothetical program for community building, which I might want to act on later, to gather collective knowledge and emotionally engage the public with this experience of crowing. Mapping. Arrange a community-driven experience in which crow lovers across the city take each other on guided tours of their neighborhood crows so that we may collectively map their presence, locations, and timelines to understand their extensive network while creating our own. Mimicking William's open call for events approach to summon our guides, each host will provide a map and lead the activity. And artistic mapping activities could include working on a physical map together or introducing reflective activities into the walks, like soundscaping. Story weaving. We could invite participants to join a crow circle where we will share personal stories, field observations, folklore from various cultures, readings from poetry and other source material, and more. Having gathered our collective knowledge about crows, we will explore how we may weave these individual reflections to co-create a contemporary mythology. This collective myth-making exercise will integrate historical and ecological perspectives while considering also like the cultural implications of storytelling on the animal other, especially the synanthropes. And then for the last activity, we could have mutual learning and invite an expert, and of course a fellow crow enthusiast, like Professor of Cognitive Psychology, Robert Bigler at NTNU, who studied corvids extensively, to connect our growing crow community to key concepts around crow behavior, cognition, and social dynamics that might deepen our observational inquiries. And this lecture could be structured as a dialogue between public and science. And then lastly, we are going to look at becoming with Lisa Kahn-Schnell, who's also one of our fellows today. Drawing from her experience transforming landscapes through various restoration projects, naturalist Lisa Kahn-Schnell turns artist in her quest to illustrate a transformative narrative of the painted lady, Vanessa Ker-Duhe. Driven by her inquiry into the physical manifestation of transformation that unfolds inside the chrysalis of these creatures, the artist tends to them in their journey from caterpillar to butterfly in order to capture their becoming. Cracking open the chrysalis aimed to create a visual companion to an existing manuscript developed for classroom education of metamorphosis for 9 to 13-year-olds. And through this process of developing her art practice, Schnell experimented with various materials and techniques, taking a loose and exploratory approach and working to larger scale. And although the final outcome of her project evolved over time, the results were ultimately transformational for the artist herself, relating to the painted lady's experience of the world, reflecting, in another way, I became the project. I questioned my assumptions about myself, what I could and could not do, and I was the one who was transformed. However, transforming, as in the case of the butterfly, seems to have a clear distinction between the lived experience before and after the specified event. In the case of the artist, becoming seems like a more fitting word for this kind of evolution. Change as a method is an emergent process, entangled in phenomenological experience, making it kind of hard to replicate. So building on Schnell's experience, I extrapolated these not so simple steps: get lost in the process, adapt, evolve, become. But how can one adapt a viewpoint that is different from your own? Philosopher Thomas Nagel famously challenges our understanding of the other when he asked, what is it to be a bat? Arguing that consciousness itself indicates that there is something that it is like to be that organism. And he goes on to state that if one understood how subjective experience could have an objective nature, one would understand the existence of the subject other than oneself. So then, what is it like to be a crow? How can the objective nature of crows reveal something about their subjective experience of the world? And so I circle back to 𝘕𝑁𝘠𝑖's final prompt, 7, I'm like a bird. Dress up in the colors of your favorite bird. You could create your own masks and props. Act like a bird. How do they fly? How do they feed? Do you sing and dance? I attempt to embody this experience of the crow, but of course, limited by my humanness, my movements in front of the camera feel orchestrated. And this is not crow-like. Dsnell did not force her becoming with a painted lady, rather the process happened as a natural conclusion of their coexistence. And I pondered about what I have learned from the crows and how they've changed me over time. And on the very first day, and the very first entry that I made on this season, I wrote field note, 7 October 2024. Watching the hunter's moon rise through the clouds, you enter the scene. My first sighting for the winter on a perfectly yellow autumn night. We pull on our shoes and follow you out. Crows are outside, no matter the weather. That phrase stayed with me. It encouraged me to go out in rain or shine. In following the crows, I discovered not only their experience of the world, but I actually experienced the world that we shared. And then I remembered this clip, which was taken by my friend, who was shooting me as I was losing myself in dancing spontaneously in the rain on Samhain Eve in the graveyard at the 𝘕𝘊𝘔𝘠𝘚, embracing nature in all her forms. It is only through communing with the animal other that we can share an objective understanding of their subjective experience of the world. It is by knowing each other through silent conversation that takes place when we share a space and time with one another, and through a simply being together. It is the red thread that Chen, Fletcher, Shenoy, Williams, and Dsnell all tug at when all 5 of their projects are actually built around observations relating to their own local surroundings. So whether we consider these artist methodologies within the scope of art or science, I hope that as a society, we will come to realize that communing with nature is the key to unraveling this thread that has led us into the red.